Hey guys, it's Celestia, and today I'm going to be discussing something I don't see a lot of people talking about, and that's ageism in the art community. I've seen some videos about it, but not nearly enough in my opinion, and I also feel like I have more insights and opinions to add to the topic. I'm someone who's been in the art community for over a decade now, as I started posting on DeviantArt at 12 and started taking commissions, at least in some capacity, at 13. And now I'm 24, which makes me older than the vast majority of my peers. So my perspective is that of someone who has seen both sides of ageism within the community, and I'd like to use this video to bring attention to the real impact that ageism can have on young artists and older artists alike. Now, all the videos I've seen have been pretty much exclusively discussing ageism towards older artists and how we struggle with it, but I haven't seen nearly as much discussion surrounding how it can impact young artists too. So in an effort to try to remedy that, I'm going to split this video into two sections: ageism towards minors in the art community, and ageism towards older adults in the art community. Before I do that though, I'd just like to acknowledge that I am in kind of a difficult position here, because while I have had experience on both ends of this, as a young artist and an older one, I can't really fully speak for either category anymore with confidence. It's been quite a few years since I last had the perspective of a minor in the art community, and I'm still relatively young compared to some of the older artists I've seen discussing their perspectives at the other end of the spectrum. So with that in mind, take my opinions on this with a grain of salt, because things may well be different for minors in the art community now than they were when I was one, and things may well be different for artists older than me in ways that I haven't yet experienced firsthand. Ultimately, however, the goal is to take an objective look at what I've seen of both, not only through my own experiences, but the experiences of others that I've spoken and listened to, as well as the research that I've done. So hopefully I can still manage to deliver some vaguely adequate conclusions. Also, just to make my terminology abundantly clear, ageism refers to stereotyping or discrimination against an individual or group of individuals based on their age alone. When I refer to young artists, I technically refer to any artist under the age of 18, although I recognize that some of these issues are more frequently experienced by artists under the age of 16. Similarly, when I refer to older artists, I technically refer to any artist over the age of 18, but recognize that some of these issues are more frequently experienced by artists over the age of 20. So basically, 18-year-old artists, treasure this time, because you kind of have the best of both worlds, at least in my opinion, and it goes so quickly. Alright, so all of the explanations and technicalities aside, let's get started on some of the common stereotypes associated with young artists and the ageism that they deal with in the community as a result of them. First of all, a lot of young artists are not taken seriously by adults, be it their peers, their parents or guardians, their teachers or mentors, even random people on the internet that are either interested in just enjoying their art or buying it. Many adults make a lot of assumptions, often without even being aware that they're doing so, that young artists are not serious about art, that they lack skill, that they're immature, that they aren't willing to work hard to improve, that they aren't interested in improving, and so on. I don't think this is necessarily limited to art though. I think that a lot of adults unintentionally and subconsciously make a lot of similar assumptions about minors in many different ways and scenarios. You know, kids these days, those gosh darn teenagers. A lot of us jokingly shake our fists at those meddling kids playing on our metaphorical lawns with their backwards baseball caps and their saggy jeans. But there are a lot of genuine underlying stereotypes that frequently hide beneath those jokes, and it leads to young people being underestimated, belittled, and spoken down to. Unfortunately, the art community is just as guilty of that as anywhere else, and not only did I experience it a lot myself when I was younger, I still see it happen constantly online. I've even been guilty of making those assumptions myself without realizing it, and I think it's important for myself and other older artists to try to be more conscious and aware of the way that we perceive younger artists, so that we aren't unintentionally underestimating or dismissing them. Another criticism I've seen made against young artists is that they don't need to try as hard to succeed at art as us old people did back in our day. I've seen a lot of people argue that we, and by we I mostly mean millennials, were their age. Drawing tablets were expensive, not normalized, and not nearly as accessible, and that therefore young artists have a significant advantage over older artists. And I mean, quite frankly, that's true. Young artists do have much easier access to tablets, and digital art is a much more widely recognized and accepted medium with more readily available tutorials and resources than we ever had. But the fact that so many older artists are holding this against them is the problem that I have here. Which carries over into the next point I'll get into in a minute, because isn't that a good thing? Shouldn't we be happy that younger artists don't have to deal with the same struggles we did? It doesn't mean that they don't have to learn the same skills that we did, and it doesn't diminish the significance of their work being good. Young artists have to deal with many adults essentially gatekeeping digital art by saying that they're less impressive than their adult counterparts because they got a head start and didn't have to deal with the problems that came from being born into the very beginning of digital art's everyday prominence, as if that takes away from their skill or validity as artists, and that fucking sucks. Obviously, I understand that in some cases, these adults are upset because young artists are bragging about being better than the adults were at their age. At which point I think it's perfectly valid for the adult in that scenario to say, hey, that's cause you sit on the throne of digital art resources that our generation built but never had at your age, could you perhaps consider chilling out? But I'll get to that later. What I'm referring to specifically is when young artists have to deal with older artists who, without any provocation or reason, hold their resources and comparative lack of struggles with art against them, and use it to gatekeep a certain circle or tier of the art community that's only open to people who metaphorically had to walk 8 miles to school every morning back in their day. As I mentioned, the next problem that young artists face regarding ageism is very related to that, and it's jealousy. So many older artists will see a 13-year-old making art that's better than theirs, and instead of thinking, wow, that's incredible, they're more inclined to tear them down, insult them, belittle them, or fall upon the aforementioned argument once again, that they're only better because they have it easier. And I get that. I really, really do. I understand that feeling, and I've been guilty of feeling it myself in the past, as genuinely embarrassed and ashamed as I am to admit it. Because I think it's a pretty normal human response to jealousy. If we make the person we're jealous of out to be less than they are, we can feel better about ourselves and our own skills and merit. It's something that happens a lot in the art community, regardless of age as well, simply due to the competitive nature of it that's resulted from social media forcing artists to constantly compete against each other for any attention and engagement on their work. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with feeling this way as a knee-jerk reaction, but actually expressing these feelings and weaponizing them to lash out at young artists is when it becomes unacceptable. Because that 13-year-old that's better at art than you does not deserve to be criticized, insulted, or demeaned just because you're envious of their skill. Yes, maybe they are that good so early, partially because they have more resources than we did, but that doesn't detract from the fact that they are that good, and they deserve praise for that. They've earned it, and their art can be good without your art being bad. Another example of ageism towards young artists that I've both seen and experienced a great deal of is that the younger an artist is, the more frequently they're asked for free art. I mean, obviously artists of all ages have to deal with assholes saying, please draw for me, I'll pay you exposure dollars. But younger artists have to deal with it in a more unique way, because the argument that I've heard directed at them a lot is, you're a kid, you're living with your parents, what do you even need the money for? I've also heard a lot of claims that artists under 18 can't really be professional artists in any way, and that because they're not at the career stage of their lives yet, they shouldn't be charging for their work. And obviously all of that is bullshit. First of all, you can't assume based on someone's age whether or not they're living with their parents. A 16-year-old can be living on their own, and a 35-year-old can be living with their mom. I get that the overwhelming majority of minors do live with their parents, but that's not really the point, because adult artists that do live with their parents aren't facing the same criticism. If an adult artist is living with family, they don't get people saying, you live with your parents so you don't need this money anyway. So why is that argument okay to use against minors and not adults? I get that a lot of adults in that situation do pay their parents rent, and most minors do not. But that isn't always the case, and there are still costs that they need to pay for either way. And all of those arguments still hinge on the concept that an artist only deserves to be paid for their work if they need the money they're charging, which is beyond unbelievable to me. Because anyone, regardless of age or profession, deserves to be paid for the work they do for a person, whether they need that payment to live or not. I think a lot of it comes down to the disconnect between art and non-creative work. Like the way people don't hold artists to the same standard that they hold other professionals. You don't see a lot of people saying, can you please do my taxes for free in exchange for exposure? And I think that to a point, this is just another example of art as a professional skill and career being devalued. But it's worth noting that young artists, as a result of ageism in the art community, suffer from this more than others, because they're frequently not recognized as professionals just because of their age, and subsequently have to deal with even more people giving them reasons, also just based on their age, that they shouldn't charge for their work. Similarly, I've also seen a lot of people deliberately trying to lowball young artists for their work or commissions simply because those artists are young, impressionable, and don't have the experience taking commissions to necessarily know that they are being lowballed. Obviously, there are a lot of young artists that know their shit and don't fall for it, but it doesn't change that it happening is a big problem in the community. Finally, the last example is one that also stems from people generalizing young artists and reducing them to a stereotype based on their age. And it's that in many cases, a young artist's age is held against them and used as a reason not to offer them professional opportunities. It's something I dealt with a lot when I was taking commissions during my teenage years, because there's this very widely accepted unease surrounding working with young artists in any way that involves money. I distinctly remember multiple occasions on which I was told, "Hey, I really like your art, and I wish I could commission you, but I've had a lot of bad experiences working with minors, so I just don't feel comfortable." And there are so many people who cite those bad experiences with minors, which are usually that the artist took money and didn't make the art wasn't high quality enough, or the art took way longer than agreed on, as justifications not to give any other young artists any professional opportunities. It's based on the assumption that only young artists do these things because of, again, the ageist stereotype that young artists are too inexperienced and immature to be trusted with money. And it's not just commissions either. I've seen major art projects recruiting on Twitter and explicitly saying they won't work with anyone under the age of 18. And I've seen more zines than I can count refuse applications from minors. And that's perfectly fine if those projects or zines involve not safe for work content or require the artist to be at least 16 to receive payment. But I've seen this from unpaid safe for work projects that openly just say, "We've had bad experiences with younger artists and we'd rather just play it safe and limit applications to adults." Like, it's even a problem when money isn't involved, because so many minors are excluded from art-based social circles or collaborations due to their age, even if there's no professional aspect. So essentially, some young artists did bad things that, for the record, adult artists have also been known to do, regardless of age. And now, what? All young artists are being dismissed and looked over by default? And barred from these projects or consideration for commissions just because of their age? I understand that a lot of minors are immature due to their age, but in so many cases, all young artists are being denied the chance to prove that they aren't, and that's not okay. Alright, so now we are at the older artists section. And my first example of the ageism that older artists experience is also inherently based in the assumptions people make, solely based on their ages. And this one is that they should be of a significantly higher skill level than younger artists. And yes, okay, if two artists spend the exact same amount of time studying art in the exact same ways, with the exact same style and influences, yes, the older one will be better by way of age alone. But obviously that's not a realistic scenario because that doesn't happen. There's no way of knowing when the adult artist in question started drawing, how long or consistently they've been drawing since then, how seriously they've taken it, whether or not they've been actively studying. There are so many factors that contribute to improving your art, and assuming that age equals experience is just ignorant. There are beginner older artists, and there are professional young artists, and there is everything in between, because everyone's journey with art is different, as it should be. And this would just be a harmless misconception, if it weren't for the fact that that misconception leads to people using the age of older artists to insult their work. I can't count the number of times I've heard people say, they're like 30 and I can draw better than them. As if being 30 means they've been studying art nonstop for 30 years. Age does not equal experience, and it shouldn't be held against an artist like some milestone that they have to be meeting. Like by 30, you have to be at a certain skill level or you're deserving of this mockery. That's both ageist and impossible to even measure. Like, if you wouldn't criticize an artist's work without knowing their age, but would criticize the exact same art because you know how old they are and their skill doesn't match your perception of what someone their age should be creating, you need to sit the fuck down in the timeout corner and think about why you think it's okay to insult art made by a 30-year-old that you wouldn't insult if it was made by a teenager. More on that, I also think it's worth mentioning the other side of what I discussed earlier, when I said that younger artists shouldn't have their skills belittled or dismissed just because they have resources that older artists didn't, which I stand by. But older artists so frequently have to deal with younger artists saying, haha, LMAO, you were 30, I'm 13, and I draw better than you. And that's when I think it's more than valid to address that those younger artists are holding older artists to an unfair standard. Older artists, when they were kids, well, when we were kids, really, didn't have nearly as much access to the tools and resources needed to draw digitally. Digital art was not a widely accepted thing for anyone other than industry professionals to make, so there weren't anywhere near as many tutorials and resources readily available for normal everyday people to learn from. There were way fewer programs to draw with digitally, and the ones that we did have weren't good, at least in my opinion. Tablets and laptops were more expensive, and it was vastly less customary and common for young artists to get them as early as they do now. There are kids now with their own tablets and laptops when they're like 8, and as such, they do get a head start on learning and practicing digital art. And all of that doesn't mean that the skills that they develop should be dismissed as a result, just because they had that advantage. But it does mean that they shouldn't be comparing themselves to older artists that didn't get those advantages as a way to insult them. Like, yes, that 13-year-old might draw better than the 30-year-old, but that is, to at least some extent, because they had a 5-year head start and way better, more plentiful, and more accessible resources. That doesn't take away from the fact that the 13-year-old's art is awesome and should be praised and recognized as such, but it does mean that it's both rude and deliberately ignorant to compare their work to an adult's work to demean them without considering those advantages. Another way older artists have to deal with ageism in the art community is the discouragement of beginner adult artists. Like I said before, older artists are held to a higher standard when it comes to the quality of their work, largely because it's assumed that they've been drawing for a longer period of time. But this doesn't just affect older artists who have been drawing for a long time, but whose skills don't meet that redundant expectation. It also affects older artists who either want to start drawing or have just started drawing. Because if older artists are held to an unfairly high standard when it comes to judging the quality of their art, by default, just because of their age, then adult beginners have to deal with the very valid worry that their beginner art will be judged as if it's the work of an experienced artist. This leads to older artists not posting their work online nearly as much, feeling like they're not welcome in the art community, and even giving up on art altogether or not starting. I've had multiple people comment that they're just starting to draw in their 50s, and one in particular actually asked me if they thought a 50-year-old could even find an audience posting and streaming art. Like, they should never have had to ask that question. They should never have had to feel like because of their age alone, they might not even have a chance at sharing their work online at all. And there are so many people like them that think their age devalues them as a beginner artist, or that it's too late for them to start learning. And it's in large part because of how toxic the internet can be towards people that don't evolve into Da Vinci, Pokemon style, just by reaching a certain age. Finally, the subject matter that older artists depict in their art is also under more scrutiny due to ageism. There's an unreasonable and unrealistic expectation that as an artist gets older, they have to start drawing only adult things. They can't be out here drawing Genshin fan art anymore. They have to have moved on to bigger and better things. They can't draw Sonic the Hedgehog if they're over 25. They should be drawing intricate original pieces and doing industry work. The assumption that older artists are too old to enjoy the interests that they had when they were younger, or any interest that is widely considered to be made for younger audiences for that matter, and make art of those things, is the exact same level of dumb as dress your age. I don't need to start wearing pencil skirts and ironed button-up shirts because I'm almost 25. Nor do I need to start drawing intricate Ghibli-esque industry-level landscape pieces because I'm almost 25. I'm gonna keep wearing my Pokemon shirts and drawing my Animal Crossing New Horizons resident rep because that's what I like, and there is no age limit on the things I'm allowed to like and draw. I'm gonna end it there with the examples simply because I could go on for a very long time when it comes to the unfair perception and treatment resulting from ageism towards both young and old artists alike. But I think you guys are getting the picture at this point, and I do need to wrap it up eventually. The point is, I think we as a community need to be significantly more aware of the prejudices we hold, consciously or subconsciously, towards artists based on their age, and try to correct those thoughts and behaviors. I can't stress enough that I don't think it's inherently bad to make reactionary, snap judgments about an artist based on their age, because a lot of these assumptions are so normalized and widely accepted that it becomes almost second nature to think that way a lot of the time. I know I've personally seen art and had my first reaction to it be, there's no way a grown-ass adult made something this bad, or there's no way a kid made something this good. As ashamed as I am to admit that. But I've also reflected on those thoughts almost immediately after having them, like, whoa, why am I being such an asshole? Society already places so much redundant importance and significance on age, and so much of our worth as individuals is decided by it. We don't need the art community to do the same. I just think it's important that we as a community try to take more time to reflect on those thoughts and judgments before we share them publicly, and try to stop treating artists differently based on their age. It's damaging and hurtful to younger and older artists alike, and no one should have their art judged, insulted, or belittled because of something as irrelevant to that art as age. Even asking yourself, would I criticize this art if I didn't know the artist's age, is a good starting point. And I think it's important that we all try to make this community a more welcoming and inclusive place for artists of all ages. Okay, I've rambled on for way too long already, so I'll end it there. Thank you guys for watching, and special thank you as always to channel members Cafe Soleil, Lotus Dreams Art, Joseph Solomon, Adele Juarez, and Fiona Paulo for their support. Additionally, if you have experiences with ageism in the community that you'd like to share, or insights and opinions that you'd like to add, please feel free to do so in the comments. I read all of them and I try to answer as many as I can, even if it does take me forever, and I'm really interested to hear what people think about this. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you in the next one.